Some storms, they come from the heavens, rolling in dark and heavy, a promise of rain or ruin. But other storms, they brew right here, inside the heart, and both kinds, well, they have a way of breaking things you thought were unbreakable. The air in the diner that morning was as thick as the clouds gathering outside. Every clink of a coffee cup, every scrape of a chair, it all felt too loud. Mara moved through the tables like a ghost, her thoughts 1,000 miles away. Belle, always practical, cranked up the radio. The crackle of static was soon interrupted by a stern voice, warning of strong winds headed straight for Dust Valley. "Guess that means the open sign stays off today," Belle announced, her voice matter of fact. But Mara just shook her head, her gaze fixed on the window. "People might still need a place to go," Belle sighed, wiping down the counter with a firm hand. "People can wait. You can't rebuild what a storm like this takes, honey." Mara didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on Eli's old truck, still parked stubbornly outside, a silent testament to something left unfinished. Later, the wind began to snarl. I found Eli outside, wrestling sandbags against the diner door, his jaw set with determination. The wind whipped Mara's hair across her face as she came out to help, struggling with the weight of a heavy bag. I couldn't help a small smile. "Didn't peg you for the heavy lifting type," I said, my voice raised over the howl. She managed a grin, her eyes flashing with a spark of defiance. "Guess you don't know everything about me." And in that moment, I knew she was right. "You'd be surprised what I listen for," I told her, and I meant it. A tumbleweed cartwheeled past us, a frantic dancer in the growing chaos. The sky had turned a bruised, angry purple. "You should go," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Get home before it hits full force." But the thought of leaving her there, in the path of this monster, it wasn't an option. "And leave you here?" I shook my head. "That ain't my style." The storm hit with the force of a freight train. The world outside the diner windows dissolved into a blur of dust and fury. The building groaned. The windows rattled in their frames, as if begging for release. We huddled by the counter, the flickering lanterns casting long dancing shadows that seemed to mock the fragile light. Thunder cracked overhead, a deep guttural roar that shook the very floorboards. Mara flinched with every clap. "I used to hate storms," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper above the din. "They reminded me of arguments I never won, of things I should have said." I looked at her, at the storm reflected in her eyes. "Storms don't argue," I said softly. "They just pass. It's the people who hang on to the thunder long after it's gone." Just then, a blinding flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by the sickening sound of shattering glass. Mara screamed and instinct took over. I threw my arm around her, shielding her as the window behind the counter exploded inward. "Get back!" I yelled, pulling her down behind the solid oak of the counter. "That window's gone!" Wind tore through the diner, a malevolent force, scattering everything. Menus, napkins, and Mara's precious sketches were ripped from the walls and sent flying. "My drawings!" she cried out, her voice filled with despair. "Forget the drawings." I held her tighter. "You're what matters." And then, as if the storm had finally won, the power gave out. We were plunged into absolute darkness. The only sound the relentless scream of the wind and the pounding of our own hearts. The worst of it passed as night fell, leaving behind a softer, weeping rain. In the weak, trembling glow of a single lantern, the devastation was clear. The diner was a wreck. Shards of glass littered the floor like cruel diamonds. Water pooled in dark corners, and soggy papers were plastered everywhere. I found Mara kneeling amidst the debris, her shoulders shaking. She was holding a torn piece of paper, A sketch of my face, ripped in half. Everything's ruined, she whispered, her voice broken. I knelt beside her, the cold from the wet floor seeping into my knees. Not everything. I gently took the torn sketch from her trembling fingers and folded it carefully. It ain't the paper that made this real, I told her, my voice low and steady. It was you, and you're still here. She leaned against me then, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over her. I always thought silence would protect me, she murmured into my shoulder. But tonight, it almost cost me everything. I looked down at her, at the way the lantern light caught the unshed tears in her eyes. Then maybe, I said, it's time to let it speak. The morning after was quiet, cleansed. The valley glistened under a pale sun. Everything washed clean by the rain. The diner was battered, bruised, but it was still standing. I was outside, working on patching the broken door frame, when Mara started sweeping the last of the water out. We worked in a comfortable silence, the shared ordeal creating a bond stronger than words. Then, Belle's voice called out from inside, a welcome note of normalcy. Coffee's on if the pot survived. We both laughed, a weak but genuine sound. It was the sound of relief, of starting over. Mara turned to me, her expression soft. Eli, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Thank you. I felt a smile spread across my face. You just said more in 2 words than most folks say in a lifetime. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded, torn sketch. I walked over to the bulletin board, the only thing on the wall that had survived, and pinned it back in its place. Guess we'll start from what's left, I said, looking at the half-finished drawing. She looked from the sketch to me, a question in her eyes. Together, I met her gaze, and in that moment, the storm in my own heart finally found its calm. Together.